What if learning English wasn't just, grinding through grammar exercises or trying to cram vocabulary? What if it was about building powerful daily habits? Habits that could genuinely change your life.
That's a pretty compelling hook.
It is, right. And it's the premise behind a resource description we've been looking at today. It's called English Habits. Master routines transform your life.
And based on the description, it definitely positions itself as, well, more than just your standard language course. It says it's for learners at all levels.
Beginner to advanced, yeah. And with this really distinct focus.
Combining English listening and speaking practice with life routines and self-improvement. That's the angle.
Exactly. And the source describes quite a substantial program, 15 hours of content. It seems to be structured around blending things like realistic conversations,
vocabulary practice, guided speaking prompts,
motivational stories, and something they actually call deep habit coaching.
And the mission statement is, well, it's pretty big, to help you learn English, change your habits, and transform your life. That's what it claims.
So our mission here in this deep dive is to really unpack this resource based only on the description we have. We want to explore its approach and understand how it proposes to link language learning with this idea of personal transformation.
Right. How does it supposedly work?
And for you, the listener, this should give you a really comprehensive look at this specific method, help you see if this way of thinking about learning, resonates with you.
Yeah, it's definitely a particular framework. Suggesting language learning can be deeply woven into personal development goals.
Okay, so let's dig in. The source description starts by laying a foundation about routines. What's the power it seems to attribute to them?
Well, it emphasizes why routines are presented as potentially life-changing, and it highlights the power of repetition, specifically applying that idea to learning English and building life habits, both together.
And interestingly, it brings in mindset stuff right away with guided affirmations. The examples given in the source, things like, I choose good habits, I grew daily. It shows it's immediately trying to connect the language practice itself with positive self-talk.
Yeah, internalizing beliefs, not just learning phrases for talking to others. It seems to integrate the language part directly with that self-improvement angle right from the get-go.
So it's not just using English, but using English to kind of shape your perspective, according to this source material.
That seems to be the idea presented.
Okay, so from that foundation, the resource description dives straight into the practical stuff. Daily life, starting with the morning. There's a section called Real English Conversation Morning Routines.
Right, and this part apparently features a slow and natural conversation between two characters, Anna and Mike.
Yes, Anna and Mike. And it's centered around typical morning activities. The description says it includes vocabulary explanations.
And suggests shadowing practice. Plus, it teaches specific daily routine verbs and, importantly, time expressions.
And right after that, there's an interactive bit. Morning routine builder you speak. This sounds like where you, the learner, immediately apply it.
Exactly. It uses these guided self-dialogue prompts, things like, I wake up at, or then I. The description highlights practice with time prepositions at, in, on, and those core daily action verbs.
Like wake, brush, shower, eat, go, the basics.
Right. And a key instruction mentioned is to speak aloud with pauses provided, which seems designed to build the actual habit of producing English about your own life.
Making it active, not passive.
Seems so.
Then the resource description brings in a motivational element, also tied to the morning. Motivational story. The 5 a.m. rule.
Okay, so this is presented as an inspiring story about someone named Sarah who supposedly changed her life with an early morning routine.
And it introduces related vocabulary, words like discipline, energy, success, routine. And crucially, the description says it includes speaking questions, things like, what time do you wake up? And how do you feel in the morning? So it's explicitly prompting you to connect the language, the story's theme, and your own habits.
Right. It seems to be constantly looping back to the user's personal experience.
So if we look at this whole morning focus together, the strategy seems to be grounding the English learning directly in the very personal, repeatable context of your own morning.
Yeah, providing models, the conversation, the story, and then demanding immediate application through the routine builder and those speaking questions.
It appears designed to make the language learning feel active and relevant by tying it directly to the daily actions you're already doing or maybe trying to build.
That's the impression the description gives.
Okay, now here's where the described approach seems to broaden out a bit. The source details something called deep listening practice a day in 2 lives.
Oh, interesting. What's that about?
Well, this section apparently presents two contrasting stories, one describing a chaotic day, and the other a peaceful, presumably more routine-driven day.
Okay, a compare and contrast.
Exactly. The description says it instructs you to compare and contrast them using discussion prompts and practicing common daily English transitions, like first, next, then, after that.
So embedding sequence language.
Right. And it reinforces the method of repetition, review, and speaking aloud, but this time within a narrative structure.
So it seems to be using storytelling to illustrate the impact of routines, letting you process the ideas about habits and the language for describing sequences through that narrative contrast.
What does that suggest about how the resource thinks we learn or maybe get motivated?
Well, based on the description, it seems to rely on the power of narrative and that clear contrast to make the concept of good routines feel concrete and desirable.
While simultaneously embedding the language needed to describe a day's events.
Yeah, it links the linguistic structure sequencing events to the conceptual structure of organizing your day. It's quite integrated, according to the source.
Moving logically through the day then, the program description covers the evening. There's a real conversation evening routine section.
Okay, similar structure to the morning then.
Seems like it. This one is described as a dialogue between friends talking about how they wind down.
Ah, so teaching relevant vocabulary like unwind, journal, reflect, dim the lights, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And the description also mentions a focus on grammar that's useful for reflection, specifically past tense verbs for talking about the day.
Makes sense for looking back.
And mirroring the morning structure again, there's an interactive night routine builder, Speak About Your Life.
Okay, so guiding you to construct your own ideal night routine in English this time.
Yeah. The description mentions role play prompts, like telling a friend about your routine. And it highlights a specific memory technique here. Say it, hear it, visualize it.
Say it, hear it, visualize it. That's quite explicit. What do you think that suggests about the underlying approach described?
Well, that specific instruction, it sounds like it's trying to tap into multimodal learning, doesn't it?
Definitely. It points towards an awareness that learning isn't just, auditory or reading.
Right. By asking the user to vocalize the routine, listen to themselves saying it, and mentally picture it. It's suggesting an approach designed to strengthen memory and internalization.
Using multiple sensory and cognitive pathways, yeah. And integrated directly into the language practice itself.
The source description then seems to deepen the actual habit-building theme with more specific techniques. It describes sections like the story practice, the 1-minute habit.
The 1-minute habit. Okay. What's the focus there?
It's presented as a true story, told slowly so it's accessible for all levels. And it introduces vocabulary related to commitment and making changes through small steps.
Ah, connecting to that popular habit formation idea.
Precisely. And the description explicitly mentions a focus on pronunciation and stress training here. So it ties a specific habit theory, the power of small, consistent actions, directly into the fundamental mechanics of actually speaking the language.
That's a neat integration, if that's how it works, linking the micro-habit concept to micro-skills in pronunciation.
Yeah. And then there's something called a habit tracker simulation. What does this section do based on the description, and what does its inclusion suggest?
Okay, a simulation. This sounds like it simulates the actual process of tracking your new routine.
In English.
Yes, it integrates speaking practice using dates, days of the week, routine times, and it guides you in reflecting on your progress in English, using phrases like, today I did this, or yesterday tomorrow I will.
So including this suggests the resource isn't just aiming to teach the language about habits.
Right, it seems to want you to actively practice the habit of tracking and reflecting through the medium of English.
It makes the abstract concept of tracking feel concrete and linguistic. You're doing it while practicing the language.
That appears to be the goal described there.
Then the program description seems to expand the practice across a longer time frame. There's a deep role play. A week of conversations.
A whole week.
Okay, this section apparently covers Monday through Sunday. It uses various conversations and scenarios focusing on routines throughout the week, morning, afternoon, evening.
And how do you participate?
The description says you take one character's role in these scenarios.
I see. So moving from those daily builders to weekly role play, that seems designed to integrate the language and the habits into the bigger picture, right? The more complex context of a full week's schedule and interactions.
It feels like building blocks, doesn't it? Daily actions first, then connecting them across a whole week, anchoring the language and the habit practice firmly in time.
A progressive structure.
The final sections described focus more on consolidating the learning and building fluency and confidence. There's something called a fluent reflection and speaking loop.
A speaking loop. Okay, what does that entail according to the source?
This part is described as focusing heavily on the reuse of all the vocabulary learned earlier in the program.
Recycling the language. Good for retention.
Exactly. And it provides open speaking prompts with pauses for you to respond. The description explicitly mentions techniques aimed at confidence building through repetition. It even suggests mirror practice, like actually speaking to yourself in the mirror.
Interesting. That suggests the resource understands that jump from understanding to confident use needs dedicated output practice.
And it reinforces that idea of integrating English into personal, even private habits, like talking to yourself, but making a structured practice.
Using that potentially awkward thing constructively.
Right. And finally, bringing that self-improvement aspect full circle. There's the final coaching and affirmation journey.
Okay, the coaching part. How is that described?
Well, this section apparently incorporates life coaching concepts delivered in English, specifically on how to maintain momentum and keep going with the habits and the language.
So motivation and persistence coaching.
It seems like it. It mentions using visualization, see your new life, and powerful affirmations like, I speak English every day, I am consistent, I am becoming fluent.
Very direct affirmations again.
Very. And it concludes, according to the description, with a final motivational story. This one illustrating transformation from lazy to leader.
Wow. Okay. So this seems to be where the resource makes its most explicit claim, linking consistent English practice directly to achieving personal change and even leadership qualities.
Yeah, it really seems to reinforce that initial ambitious mission statement right at the end.
Tying it all together.
The source material also gives some practical guidance on how to use this podcast. It suggests flexible listening options like 1 hour per day for 15 days, or maybe a more intense 5 hours per day for just 3 days.
Right, offering different schedules. And it stresses some key implementation strategies too, doesn't it?
It does, like speaking out loud every time you hear a prompt, repeating full episodes for fluency and memory.
And using a notebook to track new words, phrases, and your own routine progress.
Yeah, those instructions really underscore the active, hands-on nature of the approach being described here. It's not passive listening.
Definitely sounds like it demands participation.
So, wrapping our heads around this description,
Yeah.
what does it all suggest about this resource's overall approach? It's clearly not just presenting itself as another English course.
No, it describes a method that seems to deeply embed language learning within the practical structure of daily life and the framework of personal habit formation.
Using repetition, specific routines, motivational stories, coaching elements.
And that active multimodal practice, like the say it, hear it, visualize it thing.
It really ties the very act of learning English directly to that stated mission. Not just acquiring a skill, but using that consistent daily practice as a kind of vehicle.
Yeah, a vehicle for changing habits and potentially transforming your life, as it claims. One day, one sentence, one routine at a time.
It positions language acquisition as a tool for self-improvement, rather than something separate from it.
The connection it seems to draw is quite powerful, that the discipline and structure you need for consistent language practice. Well, that can reinforce, and maybe be reinforced by, the discipline and structure needed to build positive life habits.
A kind of synergy.
That's what the description seems to imply.
So here's a final thought based on this source. If the material suggests that building habits around your daily life can transform your life, could the actual act of learning a language through the very process of building and enacting these daily habits, could that amplify the transformation even further?
Beyond just focusing on the habits alone.
Yeah. Does the language learning add another dimension to the habit-driven transformation? The resource certainly seems to claim a strong synergy between language routine and personal growth. It's definitely an interesting connection to consider.